session is anchored in a timely and critical theme, namely how Africa can harness its own financial capital for development, especially in the face of declining external financial flows and persistent global uncertainties. The AFDB's 2025 economic outlook highlights improving growth projections for the continent, but also underscores the fragility of this progress. From Vice President Kevin Urama's presentation yesterday, we learned that foreign direct investment, official development assistance, and diaspora remittances have all declined by 3 to 6% each, and that recent announcements by bilateral development partners indicate further decline in external financial flows into Africa. At the same time, Africa is losing huge sums of capital, nearly $600 billion per year, through illicit financial flows, corruption, risk mispricing, international profit shifting, and financing inefficiencies. It also lags behind other regions in terms of government revenue mobilization, tax collection and administration, non-tax revenues, leveraging business capital, and reducing informality. VP Urama said that with the right policies, Africa could mobilize and retain about $1.43 trillion in domestic resources per year. To quote him, "There is money in Africa, it's about mobilizing and valorizing it." That assessment is at the basis of a diversity of discussions over the past and coming days, focusing on how we can unlock Africa's capital for inclusive, resilient, and sustainable development. I hope you have engaged in and benefited from this dialogue. This evening, we would like to add to these conversations, reflecting on solutions from evaluative evidence. Evaluative evidence helps us to understand what works, what doesn't, and why, so that we can design smarter, more sustainable, and context-specific financial reforms that have greater impact. Some of IDEV's recent evaluations have shown that effective domestic resource mobilization, such as tax modernization, robust public financial management systems, and well-structured leveraging through public-private partnerships can contribute to unlocking Africa's financial potential. Our evaluations also emphasize the importance of tailoring reforms to national context and ensuring institutional and financial sustainability. More details from the evaluation findings will be shared by my colleague Madhu. This evening, we aim to explore how such evidence can be used more strategically by governments, development partners, the private sector, and civil society to inform reforms that will drive inclusive, resilient, and sustainable growth. I'm glad that we are joined by a diversity of speakers for this pertinent discussion. The participation of experts from public administration, academia, an investment fund harnessing pension resources, and the AFDB offer us the opportunity for a deep reflection on the role of evaluative evidence in accelerating the mobilization, management, and utilization of financial capital for development in Africa. I would like to thank our presenter, panelists, and participants for joining us today. I also extend my appreciation to the moderator, Dr. Eric Ogunle, the director of the African Development Institute. Eric coordinates and oversees the mainstreaming of capacity development into the AFDB's operations and co-creating institutional capacity development and knowledge support for the AFDB's operations. He has held several roles within the AFDB, served in the government of Nigeria, and worked for various United Nations agencies. I am joined by IDEF Division Manager Madhu Mampuzasaril, who will present key findings and lessons from our recent evaluations. Madhu joined IDEV as a staff member in 2009, having previously worked as a consultant, and manages IDEV's division responsible for agriculture, human and social development, country and corporate evaluations. Madhu's professional experience includes his work with the Viksat Nehru Foundation for Development and the Center for Development Studies and Activities. So now I invite Madhu to come up here to present the key findings and lessons from IDEV's evaluations, and after that, Eric will moderate the panel discussion. Thank you, and I wish you stimulating discussions.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening, distinguished guests and colleagues. In this presentation, we are looking at the key findings and lessons from 3 IDEV evaluations, which are relevant for the theme harnessing Africa's financial capital for development. They are an evaluation synthesis on public financial management carried out in 2023, an impact evaluation of a bank-funded public finance modernization project in the Democratic Republic of Congo in 22, and the evaluation of the bank's utilization of its public-private partnership mechanism, which was concluded in 2019. First, let us look at the evaluation synthesis on public financial management. This is a synthesis of current knowledge and lessons from the support provided for building effective and resilient public finance management systems. As we know, the public finance management instrument is used to achieve economic, social, and fiscal policy objectives, and the allocation and use of resources. While the evaluation documented several challenges in the design and implementation of the public financial management interventions, it is also presenting to us great opportunities. The main instrument used under the PFM suite of interventions are general budget support, sector budget support, technical assistance, capacity building, policy dialogue, and analytical work. It was found that the PFM approaches are more successful in middle-income countries compared to the low-income countries. For low-income countries, they contribute substantially to the functioning of social services. Positive effects are observed on budget formulation, planning, and accounting. Middle-income countries benefit mostly from policy dialogue, technical assistance, and capacity building. The evaluation noted that information is mostly available for outputs, achievement of outputs, and short-term outcomes. Next slide, please. These include strengthening of capacity, legal environment, improved resource management, strategic budgeting, planning and execution, acceleration of the reform agenda, reduced transaction cost, increased public spending, and access to social services. Importantly, the public finance management initiatives have helped in domestic resource mobilization. Among the PFM agenda, policy dialogue is an area that needs considerable improvement. Next slide, please. The main lessons learned from the evaluation synthesis are in the areas of improving the design quality of PFM interventions, the need to ensure flexibility and adaptability of interventions, sustainability of the results achieved, and the need for continuous capacity building to manage public financial management. Next slide, please. Now let us move on to the next evaluation, the impact evaluation of public finance modernization project in DRC. This is a relatively small project of $15 million implemented over a period of 5 years ending in 2017. The main components of the project included rehabilitation, development and equipment of taxation centers, integrated computerized systems for revenue management, expenditure, payroll management, and budgetary measures, training of public administration officials and procurement of transportation equipment. The evaluation found statistically significant positive impacts on domestic resource mobilization, efficiency in public expenditure, working conditions of tax agents and officers, corruption perception, and fiscal compliance. Notwithstanding the very positive impacts, the evaluation pointed out the issue of sustainability and the need to have greater coordination with development partners. And the lessons coming out of this impact evaluation are, one, the real possibility to enhance domestic resource mobilization. Incidentally, there was something like a 10% increase in the tax collection in DRC in the treated areas. The need for managing human resources in ensuring sustainability, finding resources for equipment maintenance, the need for adaptation and flexibility from the very outset of the project, and donor coordination and synergy with technical and financial partners. Next slide, please. The third evaluation that we are looking into is the bank's experience in public-private partnerships during the period 2006-2017. Please note that the bank's work on public-private partnership has advanced tremendously after this. The bank used both lending as well as non-lending instruments. Next slide, please. The evaluation found the results achieved through both the upstream and downstream interventions. They were satisfactory. The positive results in the upstream activities included development of PPP enabling laws and regulations, development of capable PPP institutions, and regulations fostering economic growth. The downstream results included use of innovative models, co-financing with other multilateral development banks and commercial banks, use of risk mitigating instruments, and contribution to cross-cutting themes including women and youth employment. In spite of the positive achievements, there were several areas that needed strengthening. These are basically improving internal coordination of PPP activities within the bank, communication and coordination with from the three evaluations, we see that there is a great deal of opportunity for modernization, for mobilization, management, and use of capital in Africa. There are also several areas to be strengthened. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are indeed happy that you're able to join us on this very important event. As we do know, first I want to thank IDEV, Karen, and her team for inviting me to moderate this very, very important event. We're looking at harnessing financial capital for development. I want to see evidence from independent evaluations. So what we want to do tonight is a reflection on how we can accelerate, how we can use resources effectively. And I'd like us to focus on the entire life cycle of resources, from mobilization to management, then to utilization. Because as you know, if you mobilize resources and they're not properly managed or utilized, they're useless, isn't it? So we need to ensure, therefore, that we focus on each level of the value chain of capital, financial capital in this case. So today, what we gather to do is not just to talk about capital, but to talk about deeper question about how can we ensure that every CFA we mobilize, every dollars, every naira, every what other currency, CD, are effectively used for development finance and to influence and improve the quality of life of Africans. So what we're talking about here, therefore, is that the use of these resources the prospect of mobilizing them should not just be based on assumption. We want to base them on evidence, what we can see the impact they could have on the lives of the people. And we know, as Karen rightly mentioned, there's increasing need for resources in Africa. The AFCFTA implementation, you're talking about climate challenges. These are all areas that make for, more required resources. But the question is not just all about more resources, but smarter resources. And that is what Africa needs to focus on. So it is indeed then my pleasure, I don't want to talk too much, to really invite my panel. We have a panel of, like Karen rightly mentioned, diverse panel that will look at issues from different perspectives to help us to dissect how we can ensure that what we do in terms of the mobilization, the management, and the utilization of financial resources are based on evidence. So let me start then by bringing my first panelist, Mr. Rufus Dakorte. He has over 20 years of cognate experience, and he is a visionary, innovative, and results-oriented global economist. I know him personally. He's a very good friend. He's a public policy and development strategist. He is also a leading voice in Africa's economic transformation, and many of us who work in the African Development Bank can relate to that. He currently serves as the executive director covering some 4 countries, right, at the 5 countries in the African Development Bank. And of course, not just those 5 countries, but all the 54 African countries. So it is my pleasure to welcome to the stage Mr. Rufus Dakorte. Please, let's give him a round of applause as he walks to the stage. Thank you, sir. You're welcome. And the second panelist I want to introduce is Mr. Guillaume Lebris, who is a senior investment manager and head of infrastructure and energy at ILX Fund Management. He's responsible for leading the infrastructure and energy projects at ILX, and he has over 18 years of experience in emerging market development finance, with experience at EBRD and the French development agency AFD. He has worked in a variety of sectors with a strong focus on infrastructure and energy projects, especially on PPPs. And you get to hear his perspective when we get there. So, Mr. Guillaume Lebris, it's a pleasure to welcome you to this program. The next panelist is Mr. Neil Cole. He has over 20 years professional experience in the field of public finance and international financial relations. He previously held senior management positions at the National Treasury of South Africa and served as the country representative to several bilateral forums and multilateral development banks. He also once led the Collaborative Africa Budget Reform Initiative and served as a faculty member of the KSG at Harvard, Public Finance Executive Training Course, and currently he serves in the presidency of South Africa. We are pleased to have you here, Mr. Cole. Then another friend of mine is also on this panel. His name is Kevin Lumbila, who is currently a division manager in the Governance and Economic Reforms Department at the African Development Bank. He covers the North, the West, and the Central Africa at the moment. And in this capacity, he leads the team that engaged several large-scale operations, country policy dialogue with countries, and also to establish partnerships with other development institutions. Before joining the bank, he had served as the CEO of the Debt Management Office in the DRC Congo, and you see how relevant his experience will be. In addition to that, he has served also at the World Bank. We're happy to have you. And the last, but by no means the least, is someone who has been a great mentor to me, Professor Emeritus Adesoji Adelaja, who is the John Hanna Distinguished Professor Emeritus at the Michigan State University, and also at the Emeritus Executive Dean at the Dean of Cook College He is also a professor at Rutgers University. He's a very well-respected economist, and his area of expertise include economic development, land use policy, renewable energy, economic transformation, especially in conflict-affected areas. So once again, please let's give Professor Adelaja a round of applause. So I have my complete panel now seated. So it's time now to dig very deep. We have very short time to go into the discussion. And I'd like to start with you, Mr. Dakote. I know in your current role you represent so many constituencies at the African Development Bank. And I know that evaluative knowledge is very critical when it comes to financial strategies and the projects and operations that you approve at the African Development Bank. So the question then is, how do these countries that you represent, how do they use evaluative insights to inform resource mobilization strategies, to inform public financial management, and to inform the design of operations and reforms that we see in these countries?
Thank you, Eric, and thanks to Karen and her team for this opportunity to discuss evaluation and the impact it has on development in our countries. I represent 5 countries that you have mentioned, and I want to focus on the practical interactions and what I see in these countries. The evaluation continues to provide us with the opportunity to assess the gaps, identify gaps in development outcome and impact, and then it also assesses what we can do to make things better, as well as the opportunities and the challenges. And we have seen so much in some of these evaluation reports that we continue to find in terms of their relevance, in terms of their coherence, in terms of their effectiveness, their sustainability, and how they can be done to mobilize resources as well. So I take for example, in the Gambia. Gambia is one of those countries that have so much potential, but their tax system was not adequate enough. So based on evaluative findings, Gambia was able to get a project from the bank to focus on their custom, and the Asekuda War project was implemented. That project increased tax revenue collection by 30%. And as we speak right now, the Gambia is one of the champions in terms of countries that are doing well in terms of resource mobilization. In my constituency, in 2 years, Gambia has doubled their tax to GDP ratio. All of that would not have been possible if evaluation was not playing a driving role in terms of identifying the issues, and the country also using a lesson learned from those evaluations to ensure that they can change the system that mobilize more resources for them. Ghana is also another country that have done well, most especially in the PPP area. The Tema Port Expansion project, one of the largest PPP project here. And that project also built on the weaknesses and the strength of PPP. PPP is challenged in my countries because PPP means private-public partnership. In my countries, a lot of them are fragile countries, so those P's don't work adequately. Private sector is not strong. Public resources are not there. So it takes a lot of time to really get PPP successful. So the expansion of the Tema port is something that learned from how we can strengthen the private sector, we can strengthen public financial management, harness the resources to ensure that government can contribute and the private sector can contribute to have that kind of program. The other one is is in Liberia. Liberia was struggling with payment of salary. I think for 3 months, it was difficult to pay salary because they didn't have the revenue. And there was an assessment done, this one not by the African Development Bank, but IMF, where they found out that Liberia wage to GDP ratio was much, much higher than its peers. And Liberia also was spending about, I think, $5 for each dollar collected in revenue. So you're spending more than you are collecting. And so what the country did was ensure IFMIS system was implemented by the African Development Bank and the World Bank together that streamlined public financial management. And the country went on to also just recently get an $18 million domestic resource mobilization project from the African Bank. All of these would not have been made possible if evaluation was not conducted, issues were not found, opportunities were not realized.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Dakote. I like the diversity of the countries and the uniqueness of the experiences they've had, from PPP to public financial management to domestic resource mobilization. And the interesting thing I also got from your point is, I think countries that are passing through challenging situations, like the transition countries, or what people call fragile states or fragile countries, they seem to benefit more from this type of evaluative evidence, right? So that helps us to know where we should focus on when it comes to assisting these countries to succeed. Now, I want to come to you, Mr. Cole, because I like the uniqueness of your experience with respect to institutional background and also your country experience. Now, based on these unique backgrounds that you have at the country level and also managing an African-focused institution, can you share with us some examples of the use of evaluative evidence for innovative financial capital mobilization that you see?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. I mean, this is really an important discussion that is taking place. But I suppose, in all fairness to myself, I was invited to this panel as I touched down in Abidjan yesterday morning, but that's fine. I've had a really good relationship with IDEF, and I know Corin way back when I was a deputy governor to the African Development Fund. So I think there's, maybe just to start with what I think the challenge is, right? And then to get into, I mean, how evaluative evidence can help us to unravel the complexity of the challenge as I understand it. And I think that we are facing a dual challenge. On the one hand, there's the challenge of mobilizing at scale the capital that is required to tackle the structural reforms that are needed in Africa, whether that is for our energy transitions or investments that are needed in energy, in the energy sector, investments needed in health, education, agriculture, etc. Right? And if one just looks at the numbers that have been banded around, they are big numbers. The energy transition number runs into the trillions of dollars. Similar with health, similar with education. So it's a big challenge. What are the strategies that we're going to use to mobilize the capital that is required? But there's a second challenge, and that second challenge is, how do we effectively allocate the capital and align that to our national priorities? Now, this may appear to be the simplest of things to do. Just give us the money and we'll find the things that we can spend that money on. But what we are finding is that the systems that need to be in place to strategically allocate that money in a way where there's absorptive capacity, where there's going to be efficiency, and where there's going to be effectiveness are complex processes, right? So many countries have undertaken several reforms, whether it is medium-term expenditure frameworks, where you develop a medium-term outlook, whether it is program-based budget, where you're able to better align and allocate the funding to your priorities, and also work on improving the budget process. Because, you know, I mean, we don't just take capital and then one person sits in a room and decides, you know, I'm going to give 10% to health, I'm going to give 20% to agriculture. These are often in many countries comprehensive, open, transparent, and one could even say democratic processes that are underway in order to do that. I think where evaluative, evidence really helps is that it helps us to understand this complexity, right? So that we don't just rush in with solutions, that we at least have a thorough understanding of what is the problem to start off with. I think it then helps us to design the reforms that are needed. And by reforms, I essentially mean, you know, maybe two things. The one is the policy that you are putting in place to address that challenge, but also the steps that you are undertaking to ensure effective implementation. So if one takes, South Africa, for instance, to come to examples, we've been facing many challenges with our energy sector in the provision of electricity, and I'm sure by now everybody's heard about load shedding. And we're also facing a logistics problem in terms of moving the goods from harbor to the towns, and to move them by rail instead of on the roads, right? Now, if one was to go and just search for policies that are in place that relate to each of those sectors, there won't be a shortage of policies. But the problems that we face has been one of implementation. And what we've done to address that is that the presidency has set up these delivery units within the presidency that supports the government departments and the ministries to implement the policies that are within their mandate. I think and then maybe just lastly, where I think evaluative evidence comes in and is also very useful, is identifying capacity, right? Capacity of our institutions, and also the absorptive capacity of both the private and the public sector. Because often, we come up with a solution, and that solution is front-loaded, and there's a lovely term that is used in development, is called premature load-bearing, right? And often when we come up with a solution, the institution that is meant to implement the solution does not have the capacity to implement. And that is meant by premature load bearing. We are loading too much onto the institution. And maybe, our evaluations are not doing enough of that, sort of detecting the capacity of an institution to implement. If not, I would certainly, conclude by recommending that a lot more of that be done also. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cole. I can relate very much with the last point you made about capacity, given my role in the bank. We've done a lot of diagnostics in countries, and we can really see that capacity is a real issue, and they really require applying some of this evidence that we see in evaluation to really be able to address the challenges they're facing. I like the point you made with regard to the challenges. The issue of scale matters. I think that's one point I noted. And then alignment is also very important. there has to be that alignment to get the benefit. Again, to remind us, we're looking at mobilization, management, and utilization. And that is where that point about alignment comes in. If you mobilize resources and they're not properly channeled to areas where they'll bring benefit, then the capital is as good as not useful at all, or wasted at best. So thank you so much. So let me come to you, Monsieur Loubry. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Now, we know your role. You're involved, as we introduced you earlier, in fund management. Okay? So can you share with us how your institution as a fund manager, how you have contributed to the use, or evaluation has contributed to the use of capital, you know, especially when it comes to supporting development financing in the countries where you operate?
Thank you. Work?
It doesn't work.
Hello. Yeah, hello. Thanks for having me and for having ILX on this panel. We are a very young organization. We started operating 3 years ago. So it's a privilege to be with so much experience on stage. Yeah, we mobilize private capital, which is in essence Dutch and Danish pension funds investments. They committed to ILX 1.7 billion USD, which we are investing with the development banks. So the mandate, the goal of ILX is exclusively to invest in participation with the likes of AFDB, IFC, BRD, and so on and so forth, in all their countries of operations, in all the sectors they work in. And so we're building a portfolio of projects that is diversified, that is achieving impact, and that is yielding a return that attracts these institutional investors. So, so it's a small group of us. It was set up with the support of the Dutch, the British, and the German government. Most of us are former MDB people. And so far we've invested 1.2 billion, so in 3 years, in 62 projects. We obviously have projects in Africa as well, in Egypt, in Nigeria, in Mauritius. We want to do more in these countries. And where we build a bridge maybe with the evaluation work that is being done and the link to public policies is that the concept, the essence of ILX is that we rely on the capacity of MDBs to design, structure, implement, monitor projects in the private sector. The investments are in private sector transactions. So we rely on that capacity of the development banks to work with governments, to evaluate their work, to improve what they have done in the next operation. And the result is impact, but it's also a very good credit management of the exposure in the private sector.
Great. Thank you very much. I like the diversity of countries where you operate in, and I hope we can have some chat to know how your operations in these different environments, how they differ, and what are the country-specific lessons that you may want to learn. Not at this point, we'll come to that, hopefully if we have the time to do that. So let me come to Kevin. Kevin, I know that you have a lot of experience when it comes to successful mobilization of resources, and also when it comes to reforms, and also when it comes to supporting development financing in Africa. Can you share with us some of these experiences you have across countries, given your role in the bank as the manager of economic reforms?
Thank you. Yeah, I would like first to thank Karen with IDEV team to give us this opportunity to reflect on our own work. We sometimes in operation we are can be on the approval mode all the time and forget to learn from our own work. So I will take the same example on the DRC. I would like to speak in French. Je prends l'exemple du même appui institutionnel que l'équipe de leaders a évalué sur la RDC, ces grands pays au centre de l'Afrique qui, vous le savez, a connu beaucoup de ravages à cause des années de conflits pendant longtemps. Ces conflits ont eu comme impact l'instabilité politique et la détérioration surtout des capacités institutionnelles et fonctionnelles. Je prenais l'exemple de la RDC, ce grand pays au centre de l'Afrique qui a connu beaucoup de ravages à cause de conflits dans le pays. Ces ravages ont causé une instabilité politique qui ont entraîné une détérioration dans les institutions dans le pays, y compris les capacités de collecte des recettes au niveau central, mais aussi au niveau de province. Et ces pays... donc je disais que cette instabilité politique a entraîné une détérioration dans les capacités institutionnelles et fonctionnelles en ce qui concerne la gestion économique et financière du pays. Notamment en ce qui concerne la collecte des recettes au niveau provincial et au niveau national. Soit dans ces contextes de conflits, vous avez des institutions de collecte notamment qui sont dégradées, qui sont vétustes ou quasiment inexistantes. Et ici, j'ai pris cet exemple pour montrer pourquoi ce projet a marché au niveau de la banque. C'est que l'analyse du contexte a été un élément très, très important. Il y a eu une analyse sérieuse du contexte qui a fait qu'on a tenu compte de ces contextes de conflits pour, en 2012, préparer ce projet de modernisation des finances publiques. Et c'est ce contexte-là, ce projet de 10 millions d'unités de compte a duré de 2012 à 2017. Le contexte, comme je l'ai dit, nous a mobilisés pour essayer de voir qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire autrement. Dans un contexte normal, nous regardons le cadre légal, le cadre institutionnel, les stratégies en ce qui concerne la fiscalité et tout ça. Mais ici, compte tenu de ce contexte de conflits, nous avons essayé d'innover en prenant la réalité en compte. C'est que d'abord, il fallait reconstruire. Il fallait reconstruire. Et ici, je vais relever un élément qui est important aussi, à part l'analyse du contexte, c'est aussi la flexibilité. Donc, au niveau de la banque, normalement, c'est qu'on peut faire, c'est réhabiliter ou aménager les bâtiments. On n'est pas, par rapport aux procédures d'acquisition, autorisé à faire la construction. Mais il a fallu quand même une certaine flexibilité pour qu'on envisage la construction des nouveaux bâtiments et pour mettre les services de collecte d'impôts dans des bons cadres, un bon cadre de travail. Et c'est là, on l'a fait, les projets couvraient Kinshasa et la capitale et 6 autres provinces. Et partout là, on a construit les bâtiments et on a mis les gens dans de bonnes conditions de travail. Et non seulement cela, on a ajouté les moyens de mobilité pour que les agents collecteurs puissent se mouvoir dans leur partie pour voir les contribuables. On a mis le système informatique en place et on a amené maintenant la formation. Donc la formation pouvait maintenant se passer dans de meilleures conditions. Et ici, les agents de l'État se sont retrouvés dans des conditions telles qu'ils étaient motivés à faire le travail. Ça nous a permis d'atteindre cet objectif. Et aussi, il y a une deuxième chose au niveau technique, si ce projet a réussi, c'est qu'on a pu, au niveau technique, mettre un système intégré de la gestion et des recettes et des dépenses en même temps. Donc, les collecteurs d'impôts pouvaient voir les recettes qui entrent et en même temps voir les dépenses qui pouvaient se faire. Ça, c'est très, très important. Pour le moment, nous le vivons dans des pays comme le Nigeria, par exemple, où les recettes sont très, très faibles. Et une des questions, c'est que les gens ne parviennent pas à payer comme il faut parce qu'il y a ces contrats sociaux entre l'État et les contribuables est cassé. Et on ne sait pas c'est plié aux obligations fiscales. Mais le fait d'avoir ces systèmes intégrés au niveau de ce projet en RDC, ça a permis de voir cette réalité que ces recettes qui sont collectées au niveau local pouvaient aussi servir au niveau provincial. Parce que dans ces pays très centralisés, toutes les recettes, normalement, doivent remonter au niveau de la capitale et puis être rétrocédées. Avec des institutions qui sont faibles, ce sont des choses qui ne marchent pas. Mais ici, on a permis quand même aux provinces une retenue de 20% au niveau national que cet appui aussi a favorisé. Et ce qui permettait de voir qu'avec les recettes qu'on avait, les gens ont pu avoir une autre perception de l'impôt. Pour voir que, au fait, ça aide à collecter les déchets de ménage. On a vu les routes réhabilitées, on a vu certaines infrastructures sociales comme les écoles, la santé réhabilitées grâce à ce système intégré, ce qui a permis aussi de favoriser le civisme fiscal. Les gens se sont dit, OK, oui, ça marche, on voit les dépenses dans nos provinces qui sont en train d'être effectuées grâce à ces systèmes, donc on peut se plier, on peut respecter
Those are very excellent results, honestly.
Just one last word. C'est qu'on a pu créer un genre de cercle vertueux. Plus de taxes, on pu permettre plus de dépenses sociales importantes. Et les gens voyant ces dépenses-là, on a pu collecter plus. Ce qui a fait qu'année par année, il y a eu au moins 10% de recettes en plus dans les provinces. Merci beaucoup.
It goes without saying, if people can see what the tax they're paying could deliver for them, I mean, they naturally would just follow. The fact that people are paying very high implicit tax in Africa is one of the factors why many people are really not so keen about paying for taxes. And like you said, if I see because I would have still used those resources anyway, but if the government is able to deliver on those services, water is paid for, is provided, electricity is provided, it's very easy. But in most of African countries, you see a situation where you have paid for services, yet you still have, in tax, then you still have to pay from your pocket in terms of, So I think I really can relate with this experience that you really mentioned. Now let's look at it from academic and policy research perspective. And that's where I'll bring a distinguished emeritus professor, Adelaja, to this conversation. Now, from your perspective as a policy researcher and also someone who has also applied this policy research in your work of advice in several African countries. Now, how do you think organizations or countries should utilize evaluation insights to inform resource mobilization, the strategies, financial management, or the design of operations and reforms, especially in African context?
I started by thanking Dr. Ogunlayer for inviting me to be part of this panel, and also Karen for inviting me. I think this is a very, very important panel discussion. And it's given me a chance, just going through some of the materials that I got to look at, to see how the evaluative work that is being done by Karen's shop really undergirds the bank's ability to actually monitor its programs, but also instill a higher sense of responsibility on its clients, the government that it's working with. I think those high standards should really be infused, not just in projects that you finance, but in the activities of those that you finance. Another key thing I want to say is that I think good and effective project evaluation actually starts a program or project design, because unless you design the project to reveal information that can then be evaluated, you're not going to have much to evaluate. The hat that I wear is that as a researcher, policy researcher, but I also have had the pleasure of serving as chairman of the board of an investment bank, a major investment bank in Africa, which means that I see both sides. And to answer Eric's question, you know, how do we use evaluative work to improve our processes? I think the first thing to remember is that as you're designing a program, you need to rely on lessons that you learn from previous programs. So this evaluative work, particularly concrete evaluative work, is useful just in basic understanding of, you know, what we did wrong, what processes to improve, how can we do things better, how to better design things in the future. I think that's extremely important internally for an organization that's implementing programs. We can't go from project to project without learning, and learning is fundamentally important to process improvement. But particularly in Africa, I think that what we do with this kind of information is demonstrate value added. I think one of the speakers said earlier, one of the reasons why people are not so eager to pay taxes or have taxes increase on them is because they're not sure what the benefits of those increased taxes are. Every time I talk to my Nigerian fellow citizens, you know, they're paying all kinds of money for electricity, but they don't see electricity improvement, and they struggle with, why should we be doing all of this? You know, they don't necessarily always trust government, and this is not just in my home country, Nigeria, but it's across the board in Africa. So we need to do a better job in demonstrating the return on investment, the ROI from public investments. These things come from taxpayer monies in many cases, but sometimes, you know, companies like Chapel Hill Denham that I'm involved with also has to get involved, and they finance some of these projects. At the firm, they don't get involved unless they're very, very clear that the government entity that's going to implement the program can deliver and deliver well. Because from an investment banker standpoint, we're not just generous people, you know, we're willing to make sure that we protect the investments of those who invest through us. And those funds that investment banks put into this public-private partnership projects are funds for which people expect a return, you know, and you invest based on an expectation of 10%, 8% return. You can't go back and say, well, we can only do 2% because this government official didn't do the right thing or whatever. So I think for the public to have greater trust and confidence in government, particularly with public sector projects, you know, evaluative evidence, right, is extremely, extremely important. I think one of the things that we can also use such information for is understanding funding landscape changes. The kinds of sources of funds that you need at the initiation of a project may not be kinds of funding that you need at the end of the project or when you want to move to another project down the line. I would say that public confidence is endogenous to the effectiveness of past projects. So, and that means that future funding actually would change. You may bring in new funders because they have more confidence because you've demonstrated effectiveness in previous projects. So that's one more thing that I think is important. I think the information that you get out of this process is also useful in identifying required process changes. And I'm talking basically about learning from the past and using the information that's been learned to change the way we do things so that things can be done better. We can use to design elements of a project that would enhance, say, teamwork, for example, between the partners that are implementing the project. Even they can be used to improve how you actually manage resources. I think that's also very, very important. But the part that I'm most excited about is the ability to tell stories of how effective you've been, right? Oftentimes, the public doesn't tell its story or sell itself to people who contribute to the process of funding or providing funding for public projects. So I think an evaluative process that provides good quality, detailed information can be used in marketing, public relations, communications, and that increases or improves the climate for future funding for public projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Delaja. Thank you so much. I think I love that last point you made about giving us the opportunity to tell our stories. I think that telling the story is very important. The issue of value addition is equally important. How do we improve the processes and ensure we do better next time is also absolutely important. I'm checking my time, and I'm wondering whether I may have to come back to the panel, but I want to involve my audience. You've been very patiently waiting, listening to the presentation, the keynote remark, and several points from the panel. So I'd like to throw it open to the audience now. And please, you have only 30 seconds to ask your question. 30 seconds or less, actually. And the reason is we want to engage as many people, as many participants as possible. So the quicker you do it, the more opportunity we'll have for others to be able to contribute. So quick introduction, your name, the institution you represent, and straight to your question. Yes, sir.
Ok, merci beaucoup à vous. Je suis Ndan Guesson Joël de la Convergence des organisations de la société civile pour la concertation État, société civile Côte d'Ivoire, société civile Côte d'Ivoire. Le sujet, il est intéressant, la capacité donc de pouvoir vraiment participer aux questions donc d'évaluation des politiques publiques. Et en tant que société civile, nous avons peut-être une petite expérience de contrôle citoyen, mais nous souhaitons beaucoup d'inclusivité quant à ce que nos capacités en tant que société civile soient renforcées pour que nous puissions vraiment participer, contribuer, donc avec l'aide et l'appui de la banque, vraiment à pouvoir donc participer de manière donc effective et efficace à ces questions de politique, à ces questions donc d'évaluation de politique publique, parce que la confiance se perd. Parce que les populations doutent de l'efficacité de certains programmes, et il faut bien qu'avec l'implication de la société civile dans le contrôle, voilà, cette confiance-là puisse être restaurée. Mais vraiment, dans le cas particulier de la Côte d'Ivoire, c'est un peu difficile, et nous souhaitons vraiment, avec l'appui donc des bailleurs, notamment de la BAD, et donc l'implication, comme je l'ai dit, de la société civile, voilà, que nous puissions vraiment arriver à pouvoir le faire, et donc avoir des projets de plus en plus développés, mieux mis en œuvre, plus performant, plus efficace, plus de confiance et plus de levée de ressources fiscales.
Thank you very much.
Bonsoir à tous. Bonsoir aux panélistes. Je suis Moreau Jean-Jacques, secrétaire général de la Fondation et la FISou. Donc, dans le cas de IDEV, pendant que IDEV était en création, peut-être au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire, nous y participons à tout moment en tant que société civile. J'ai cru que IDEV, dans ses actions futures, allait impliquer la société civile en renforçant nos capacités en matière d'évaluation. Mais après, on n'a plus vu ces actions-là. Est-ce que c'est possible que IDEV puisse renforcer les capacités de la société civile, surtout au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire? Merci.
All right, thank you so much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Ohene Asante from the Parliamentary Service Accra. My question is very simple, but it looks a little bit funny, I know. So sometimes when we talk about mobilizing capital from the private sector point of view, one of the key things that I've kept hearing for some time now is the role of the private sector as an engine of growth for the African continent. But there is one thing that we've not really looked at when it comes to individual wealthy personalities on the continent
and their quota that they have to bring on board as public-private partnership. For instance, a very funny story happened in Ghana. There is a billionaire in Ghana, or maybe a millionaire, irrespective of the currency. And there was a project that was sent to him by a municipal chief executive, and he turned that project down. He decided to go buy a Tesla electric or this car, Cybertruck. And when he came, he bought other multiple cars to set up an automobile museum. So one economist did an analysis telling that sometimes there must be responsibility of capital deployment and wealth in terms of what we need as a state or what we need as people and the kind of people that we need to get on board. Having shared this story, I want to understand from the perspective of some of these senior economists and experienced financial professionals, what is the role of individual wealthy personalities and some private personalities who have the resources but decide to hold it and do other things that are not directly beneficial for economic growth on the continent. Thank you so much.
We can proceed to the conversation. I'll just give the opportunity to any member of the panelists to respond to either the issues raised. And we press for time, so we need to close in, say, 5 minutes or thereabout. So please, straight to the question, to the point. If there's any of you, please, you can volunteer to intervene.
I wanted to address the last one about the role of high net worth individuals in Africa. The key thing to know is that to raise money from high net worth individuals, and most of them are first generation wealth, right, or second generation at best, you need to be able to convince them with the kind of evidence that we're talking about that the resources they contribute will translate into meaningful impact. I want to give a good example. When I was in Nigeria, government was spent in terms of the ability to address the Boko Haram issue in the Northeast, just too many victims. And we came up with the idea that we should raise the money from high net worth individuals. And the presidency organized a one-day fundraising, if you see what I mean. It shocked the nation that over $340 million was raised in one day. But it was because government was accountable. They were able to sell the program that they had in place for implementing the project, right? They were able to suggest that this money was not going to ministries, but will go to the special units that were going to be created, and that the private sector would be given an opportunity to actually guide the deployment of their investment. So we can raise money from the private sector, but we got to do the evaluations to demonstrate that government knows what it's doing. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Cole.
But I also think that there's a policy issue in the question, and that is the distinction between private investors and the way that individuals fulfill their obligation, and that fulfilling the obligation is often through the tax system. Right? So, I mean, if you want to introduce a progressive tax system, then the more higher income you earn, the more taxes you're paying. Whereas getting private investors to invest, I think, needs to take into account all the points that you raise, and that is going to be about, I mean, the de-risking of the investment that is to be made, the rate of return, and also some will look at the virtue of the investment that they're undertaking. But I think there is an important distinction that needs to be made, that we shouldn't be placing wealthy individuals within that same category as private investors. If we want to get wealthy individuals to pay more, maybe we should get them to pay more through the tax system. Thank you. Because then we remove the voluntary part, right? Because as a private investor, I mean, you're investing voluntarily and you are assessing things completely differently. But if you're taxing wealthy individuals, you're removing the voluntary bit and you're making it obligatory. More you earn, the more you pay in taxes. Thank you.
Okay, yes.
No, just maybe to add on the where the money is for, where the capital lies, and from our experience in raising this 1.7 billion, we didn't go to wealthy individuals. We went to pension funds. We went to pension funds which have a huge sense of corporate responsibility in the Netherlands, in the Nordic countries. The responsibility of the wealthy, as was mentioned before, lies there somehow. But the point about distinguishing them from wealthy individuals is almost irrelevant, in the sense that if you want to mobilize capital, and that's the point you made, you need data. You need to show to the people investing or the institution investing that they will achieve impact. So you need impact data, and you need harmonizing on that from the MDB front. And then you need transparency on the performance of the loans. And that's how ILX raised the money we raised, is through accessing a database of showing that the asset class of the loans done by the development banks is actually performing very well. So this point of data also relates quite well, I think, to the point of evaluating.
Got a good point. Yes, Mr. Dakota.
The civil society question was not, my French interpretation was breaking up, but I just want to indicate that civil society is vital. In our evaluation report, continue to highlight the importance of engaging with civil society. Like in Sierra Leone, the government has this program called the Financial Risks Forum, where they bring civil society, SOEs, and different government agencies together to address some of the issues that are facing PFM and project management as well. In Liberia, we have the same thing where the government has a joint steering committee, also bringing civil society and all of that. But having said that, and I know we're about to wrap up, the challenge that we continue to have right now is the problems on the continent are just so many. So the problems seem to overwhelm the findings of evaluation. As evaluation comes up, the problems get more, and the countries don't have financial resources to implement. So all of the youth issues, challenges you have, all of the capacity challenges you have, all of these are driven by the financial problems that the countries are having. That's why my constituency, my countries, and myself, we usually push for the multilateral system to focus more on building countries' financial capacity through domestic resource mobilization, because PFM will not be stronger. I mean, you go to some of these offices, budget offices, you see the amount of money they pay is not enough. They want to leave and all of that. So whatever capacity you build is going to, migrate. So I think development to mobilize more resources and solve the critical problem that audit findings, or evaluation findings are indicating in audit findings. We need to find a way to solve the financial problems of this continent through DRM.
Thank you very much. I quite agree with you. No country ever developed with external resources, so we must look inward. Domestic resource mobilization is the right way to go. It's sustainable. It also holds people accountable, especially those who will manage the resources. So thank you very much. I see we've gone above our time, so thank you very much, my dear panelists. Is anybody who has a quick 30 seconds? I like 30 seconds. Huh? Is anyone who has just a quick final comment, 30 seconds or less? Okay, Professor Adilaja, please.
I do. Whether we're talking about high net worth individuals or investment bankers, I think it's important that we recognize that the demonstration of effectiveness, right, of government is important. Again, the firm that I'm involved with, we raise a lot of money for infrastructure projects. We have from the bond market, for example, and raise a lot of money in the area of renewable energy and so on and so forth. I think that the market can perform better in our fundraising efforts if they knew that their funds would be well managed by government and they knew that the projects would be effective. So those metrics, those ROI measures are very important. You know why Lagos State is the most effective in raising funds in Nigeria, right? Because it's the best at demonstrating the impact of its projects. Just simple. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, go.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a quick point that is really a lesson learned from the implementation of South Africa's Just Energy Transition Investment Plan. So we've stopped using the term mobilizing. We've replaced it with unlocking. Because every source, every financial instrument comes with its own complexity to unlock. I mean, with commercial financing, there needs to be the de-risking of commercial investment. And for that, you need the appropriate vehicle to be put in place. For concessional loans, there's the high debt burden that many African countries face. So even concessional lending from the MDBs comes with an increase in the sovereign's public debt. And in each one of those loans, whether it goes to a energy utility company, has to be guaranteed by the sovereign, which contributes to the sovereign's contingent liabilities that has an impact on its credit rating. Grants are limited, and the need for grants are extremely high. So I think we maybe need to be thinking of this mobilization more in the sense of the steps and actions that need to be taken in order to unlock these various sources and various instruments that is available. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate you, our audience. Thank you for your participation, active participation in listening, and also for your very wonderful questions. And more importantly, to my panelists, I think you've done justice to this very important topic. We came here to reflect, and we're really leaving with that sense of purpose that evaluation is central, it's important when it comes to evidence-based policy making, policy implementation, and also improving, ultimately, the quality of life of the people. So the fact also remains that we need to ensure that when it comes to evidence-based policy, it holds a lot of credibility. That's what I hear from what the panelists are saying. It also helps us to unlock what you could call smarter, faster, and even fairer capital that are required for development. And so evidence-based, research evaluation is not just a matter of whether we should do it or not. It is a necessity. It is not a luxury. It is something we need to do. So as we leave here, we want to have that in mind as we go, that let's ensure that we drive policy with this type of evidence, because that is what will improve what we do, the processes, the management, the mobilization, and more importantly, the utilization of capital. So thank you once again. A round of applause, please, for my panel. So thank you. We appreciate your time, and have a very wonderful evening. Okay, so thank you.